Hi, my name is Zach Simmons, and this is Pro Football Today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the NFC South. I'll give you my predictions of what I think the standings are going to look like this year here in 2019. So, in last place, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I like what the Buccaneers have done on defense. They lost Quan Alexander, a pretty heavy blow. They brought in Deion Buchanan. He's a good fill-in. It's definitely a downgrade, but Buchanan is still a good, solid starting linebacker in this league. But it looked like that Buchanan was going to be their replacement. But then they go and draft Devin White. Devin White can possibly be better, I think, than Quan Alexander. I think they found their franchise guy there in Devin White in the inside linebacker position. So, but my main issue with Tampa is this offense. It's mainly the receiving core and Jameis Winston. So looking at the receiving core, I thought last year they had one of the best receiving cores in the league, if not the best receiving core in the league. I mean, you have Deshaun Jackson, you have Adam Humphries, Chris Godwin, and of course Mike Evans. It's a pretty solid receiving core. But then they lost half of that this free agency. They traded away Deshaun Jackson, and then they let Devin Humphries go to Tennessee. Now they still have Mike Evans, who's a good receiver, definitely a top 10 receiver in this league, and Chris Godwin, which, if you are a fantasy player, watch for Chris Godwin this year. I have him as one of my biggest fantasy sleepers in 2019. My problem is, though, who's going to be the slot receiver? Do they have a viable slot receiver option there in Tampa? They need some receivers to help out Jameis Winston. They also need a little bit more of a running game from Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones. Both of these running backs have potential to be top backs in this league. They just need to take that next step up. We're looking at Jameis. Being a Bears fan, I've watched us go through head coaches. I've seen us go through offensive coordinators because of our starting quarterback. We saw that a lot with Jay Cutler. And you've seen the kind of same type of thing with Jameis Winston. They let go of Lovie Smith because Smith wasn't handling Jameis the way they wanted him to handle him. So they brought up Dirk Cutter, promoted him to head coach because Dirk Cutter was supposed to know how to use Jameis better. And that didn't work. So now Cutter's gone. They brought in Bruce Arians. Bruce Arians is a good head coach. But the question remains, what will Jameis do this season? Last season, they benched him for Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick played very, very well in the first 4 games. Didn't really have it after that. But Jameis, he wasn't showing anything. He would show flashes here. They start him. There's nothing. So they bench him, bring him back the next game, and so on and so on. But Jameis never really showed he can be the starter for this team. He's never shown he can be the starter for this team. So the question remains, is Jameis Winston their franchise guy? And to be honest, now that Bruce Arians is in town, this is a make or break year for Jameis Winston. He has to show that he can be the starting quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If he can't do it this season, he's done. I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a quarterback next season. But Jameis has to do something. If so, I can see him taking 3rd place. I don't see him going past 3rd place, though. This is a team that's rebuilding. It's a good team. They just need some extra work, and they might need a new quarterback. But number 3, I had the Carolina Panthers. Now, I like the Panthers. It feels weird having them number 3 because I think they're definitely a number 2 talent here in the NFC South. I like what they've done on defense. They added Bruce Irvin. They drafted Brian Burns. They brought in Trey Boston. This is a good team. And don't forget, Gerald McCoy is now starting there at D-tackle. But my issue is, all they've merely done is just replace. They replaced Julius Peppers there with Bruce Irvin. They replaced Thomas Davis there with Brian Burns. They really haven't added too much, except for McCoy and Boston. So they really haven't upgraded this defense too much. But hopefully with Brian Burns, they're a nice young player. Maybe they can start to build up this defense. Have it be what it used to be back in 2014, 2015. And this offense, they didn't add any playmaking receivers. But to be honest, that's not their style. They haven't had a number one receiver since Steve Smith, and there's a reason for that. I think it's mainly because of how Cam Newton plays. He doesn't necessarily bomb it. He doesn't launch the long ball. But if they want to make playoffs, if they want to get to that second spot, or even go up to number one, these receivers have to do some work. DJ Moore needs to take a step up in his second year. And Curtis Samuel, who actually looked pretty good last season, he's going to have to take a step up too. But don't forget they also added Jarius Wright and Chris Hogan. Now Chris Hogan is a good, viable option there at receiver. But they just need to do a little something more. So that's why I have Carolina number 3. I like this team. I like what they're doing. But looking at the other two teams, I just can't say they're going to be second place or first place. So second place, I had the Atlanta Falcons. Now the Falcons, last season, the reason they didn't do very well was because they lost a lot of their starters there on defense. Well, this year, Deion Jones is back. Keanu Neal is back. This is going to be a really good defense. They got a chip on their shoulder. They were hoping last year to get back into the Super Bowl. But with all those injuries, it just wasn't possible. So now this year, expect them to go on a rampage. But this defense, I think it looks pretty good. They brought back Adrian Claiborne there at D-tackle, or defensive end. This defense should look pretty good. They're not going to turn your head, but they're going to be an underrated defense. Don't count out Atlanta's defense. Then on offense, nothing's really changed. Yes, they lost Tevin Coleman. But to be honest, they're the number 2 spot. Tevin Coleman's kind of easy to replace there. They have Ito Smith, who should be able to take that role. It's not, I mean, it's a loss. But I think it should balance itself out. But this team, they're going to be a good team. I don't have them making playoffs. The reason being, there's just so many good wild card teams. The problem is comparing the AFC to the NFC, because I've said the AFC is a stronger conference than the NFC. But when it comes to NFC, you've seen a little bit more of a wild card race. Reason being, you have a lot of teams that are going to be in the 9-7, 8-8 range. None of them are necessarily Super Bowl contenders. The only one that can possibly make the Super Bowl, I think, is the Minnesota Vikings. Otherwise, all these teams, yes, there's a good wild card race. Yes, they're really close in standings. However, they're not necessarily threats. Well, if you take a look at the AFC, I have the Chargers and the Texans making the wild card there in the AFC. Those are two really good teams that actually might have a shot at taking out the Patriots. So you have good Super Bowl contenders there in the AFC wild card. You don't necessarily have that. The NFC, you have a lot more 9-7, 8-8 teams that are competing, which, to be honest, more than likely they're not going to make it past the wild card round. So that's why I don't have Atlanta making it. There's just so many good teams. You'll hear in my next video who I have making the playoffs instead of Atlanta. But number 1, I have the New Orleans Saints. Now, the one thing I like what the Saints have done is what they did at the tight end spot. They brought in Jared Cook. Now, I think Jared Cook is the best tight end they've had since Jimmy Graham. Now, Benjamin Watson was good. Josh Hill is a good tight end. But Jared Cook, I like what I see from Cook. I think he's an underrated tight end. And in fact, once again, if you're a fantasy player, watch for Jared Cook. I think Jared Cook could be a viable option for you. So, he's one of the only tight ends that's a vertical threat. He was a leading receiver for the Oakland Raiders last season. Jared Cook, I think, will do wonders for this team. And don't forget, they brought Michael Thomas back. Signed to a huge deal just a couple days ago. So this team, they're a good team. This is a true Super Bowl contender. It's a no-brainer. The Saints will win this division unless something terrible happens. But otherwise, watch out for the Saints. Saints will do just fine. Even without Mark Ingram, they have Latavius Murray. Everything is okay. The same team that they were before, and before they were Super Bowl contender. With Jared Cook, I think they're even more Super Bowl contender. So watch out for the Saints this year. So that's why I have the Buccaneers number 4, Carolina number 3, Atlanta number 2, and New Orleans staying there at number 1. So thank you for watching. If you have any comments, I'd love to see what you have to say, even if you disagree with me. And please subscribe as well. I hope you have a really good rest of your day.